Before we begin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is John. I was christened John, but in those days, people who were called John, they called them Jack. And it happened all across the board. My wife's name was Florence, but they called her Helen. Her sister was called Chris, I think, and she was called Daphne. They did that in those days. So all my life I've been called Jack. I was born in 1926 and in Edgbaston, Birmingham, and I went to the local school. My mother died when I was 10, and so my father was left with an older sister, myself, and a younger brother. He'd been injured in the First World War. He'd lost his leg, and he got an artificial leg. So thinking back, I think he did really well to bring up 3 children and work under those circumstances, you know. But thinking back, I had a very happy childhood. All the memories of my childhood are very happy ones. What else would you like to know? I got married in 1954, and I've got 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. I had a boy and a girl, a boy and a girl, so I was very lucky that way. And fortunately, they all live within a few miles of this. They live Earlswood and Withall, so I'm very lucky that way. Although my wife has been dead now for 2 years, I've got the family close by me, so I consider myself very lucky, you know that. After I came out of the services, I went back to the post office, where I'd been since a lad of 14 I started. And I was as a post office engineer all my life, so all my work in life I was mostly with the trunk mechanisation. When SDD started, all that sort of thing, you know. I worked in an underground exchange in Birmingham, which a lot of people didn't really know about, but it was built as in case when atom bombs were talked about, you know. This was a huge underground exchange under Telephone House in Birmingham. So I worked many years there.
What year were you conscripted?
I was conscripted in 1944. I can remember it clearly. I had a bedroom of my own up on the 3rd story of the house, and my sister came with the calling up papers, and I was all excited, you know, I'm going in the army with all my friends. Everyone there they were very keen to join up, you know, in those days. And I got this, when I read this letter, I couldn't believe it, you know, that they decided that I was going to work down the coal mines rather than the army. And so I saw the local union rep at work, and he accompanied me to an appeal. And they didn't let me go into the appeal. He was a postman actually. He went in and fought my case, or so be, but it was a waste of time, like, you know. They just said it had been turned down and that was it, I had to go.
What happened when you were conscripted?
During those times, like, everyone had to enlist for national service, so when I was 17 and a half, I enlisted for national service, and they give you a national service number. And out of that, numbers were put into a hat, and the number was drawn out. And I was one of the unlucky ones where my number was drawn out. And so I was scheduled to be a Bevin boy, to work down the mines. There was an appeals procedure, so I appealed against it. And my local rep from the post office came with me, but it was a bit of a farce really, you know, it was dead loss, there's nothing I could do about it. And so that was it. I was called up when I was 18, and we did, I think they gave me a pair of boots and a tin hat, and we were sent to Coventry to a training pit, which was nothing like the real thing at all. It was all whitewashed and bright lights, and the thing that struck me, we went down in a cage. And the funny thing about that, when you go down in a cage, there's two cages, one goes down and one goes up like that. Well, as they pass, there's air flowing all down there. As they pass, you get all confused, so you feel as though you're going down, and then suddenly you stop and you're going up, and you get a shock when you get at the bottom. You are at the bottom, you know, you think you've gone to the top. It's a very strange thing, that. Anyway, we did a fortnight's training there. It was a bit waste of time really, you know, they're just walking around showing you places, and the pit at Coventry wasn't like a real one at all. And so then I was posted out to Hensford, where there was in a little village called Wimblebury, which was a hostel. We were all in it together, you know. And we went from the hostel to various pits around Cannock. And the one they sent me to was at Brayton, which is by Rugeley, Cannockshire. And this pit was what they call a drift mine. You walked down, there was no cages going up and down, you walked. And it was about half a mile walk, gradually going down and down and down. And that was a bit of a shock to me. Not only was it very dusty and dark, but there was a breeze flowing down there, so it wasn't that bad. But the first job I ever had was pushing the tubs. You can imagine the coal came from the coal face on a conveyor belt, and it had to be tipped into these tubs. So there had to be someone at the back end pushing the empty ones forward, ready to be filled. And in a coal mine, there's fresh air coming down from the surface, down, round and out. And so if you're the back end of this breeze, which I was there, pushing these tubs, you can imagine coal coming off a off a conveyor belt, tipping into a tub. You imagine all the coal dust, and you're at the back end of it. As soon as that tub got full, you've got to push an empty one. So I stopped that for 2 days and I went home. That was enough for me. And I'm afraid I was very, very naughty, really. And whenever I could, I went off, and I've had each weekend we used to go down to Dale End and sign on for the army 1 week, and the next week we'd try the Navy, and the week after we'd try the Air Force, but they rejected us. As soon as they found out you were working in a coal mine, they just didn't want to know, you know. So that was a dead loss, but I had some good friends down there. I must say I had some happy times. We were all, when you get a crowd of people, you're all in the same sort of boat, you know, so you're going to try and make the best of it. But it was a mistake, really, having conscripted mine, because there was lots of volunteers, people who didn't want to go in the forces. There was a hell of a lot that had joined the RAF as air crew, and they had half the training for air crew, but the war was almost at an end, and so they suddenly decided they didn't need all these air gunners and that. And these people were told, well, I'm sorry, you're not going to be an air crew. You can join the RAF regiment, or you can come out and join the coal mines. And lots of them did that. But the mistake was mixing all those up with conscripts. You know, being as we knew that the only thing they could do with us was push us back in the army, which was what we wanted. And so these others, as if they got any cash to live on, they could do that. There was no check on whether you worked or not. It was just like being an ordinary job. If you went sick, that's it. So if you could scrounge enough money, then you would. And I'm afraid I did, along with the others, we did lots of naughty things. There was, at the hostel, you paid 30 shillings for your week's keep. And being a miner, miners had an extra ration of cheese. So at the table there was always bread and cheese free. So you went, you gave a ticket up for your breakfast, and if you were not working now, then you'd got no ticket for a dinner. You'd got one in the evening. So you had to make do at lunchtime, and there was bowls of soup there. The soup was plenty of that if you wanted. So we used to live on a bowl of soup, bread and cheese, dry bread and cheese, and then the puddings was made so that you took your dinner plate back, and the girl gave you a pudding. So the dodge was that you went to anyone that was working and you volunteered to take their dinner plate back, and you'd say collect about 2 or 3, take them back and pick up 4, one for yourself. So you got a sweet that way. And that's what I did. And we used to go to the coal mine where I worked, as I say, was in Rugeley, which was about 2 or 3 miles from the hostel. And we'd all get on a bus used to pick us up, and we'd all start off, and then someone would say it was a bright sunny day, and they'd say, well, I don't think I think like working today, Jack, you know. And it would gradually creep all around the bus, and in the end we all come on the bus coming back. So I'm afraid I did a lot of naughty things down there, which I shouldn't have done really. I wasn't very patriotic then. And that was, in the end, they turned around and interviewed us from the Ministry of Labour. A man came and said, you've either got to mend your ways or we're going to call you up for the services. And that's exactly what we wanted. So they'd done again. So then I found myself, I'd done 12 months in the mines, and I started off then as a soldier. And being as I was post office, the one thing was signals. I did virtually the same job in the army, similar anyway to work to what I was doing before I joined up.
Was it dangerous to work in the coal mines?
I can't say it was really dangerous down there, but I did have an accident myself. In a coal mine, you work a coal face for so long, you imagine you can only go on a yard at a time, you know, and eventually it gets too far to bring in all the equipment back. So they close that face down and open up another one. And all the equipment in the old face that's finished working has got to be recovered. And one thing down a coal mine is that you're never allowed to work on your own. It must all, for obvious reasons. There's always 2 of you. And I was sent with an experienced miner to recover a coal cutter. And a coal cutter is like a huge metal coffin, very, very heavy, no wheels on, and it has to be dragged with like a ratchet attachment. And although I did nothing towards dragging this coal cutter, I just was there to keep the fellow company, if you like. You know, as you say, he couldn't be there on his own. And anyway, we dragged this coal cutter, about 50 yards or so, and we sat down to have a sandwich and a drink of water, getting down, and suddenly this miner was sitting opposite me there. He suddenly shouted to look out, and I jumped up like that, and this hand was behind me, and a big rock fell down from the roof and caught my hand, and I had to be carried back out. I could have walked, but they carried me out and took me in an ambulance to the local hospital. And I've still got my own little scar there, little blue one, from the day that it happened. So that was the only dangerous thing, but I never knew of anyone else. I didn't know of anyone killed or anything like that.
Thank you for answering my questions.
You're more than welcome, thank you. Yeah.